Ethan Crowley thought the abandoned Disney park was just a forgotten relic, but the moment he stepped past the rusted gates, he realized he wasn't alone. His flashlight caught strange footprints too large to be human, and the laughter of children echoed where no children should be. By the time he found the first Mickey mask fused to a body, it was already too late because something inside the park wanted him to wear one too. I never liked amusement parks. Even as a kid, they made me uneasy at the crowds, the strange noises, the endless grins plastered on cartoon faces. It always felt fake, like a place where joy was forced instead of real. That's probably why my friends thought it would be funny to dare me to sneak into the abandoned section of Disney World. They didn't believe the rumors about accidents, about people going missing, about the park shutting down part of itself like sealing a wound that didn't want anyone to see. They laughed, pushed me, told me I wouldn't last 5 minutes inside. I laughed too, but it wasn't real. Deep down I already felt something was wrong the moment I saw the old gates. The iron was rusted and covered with vines that curled like veins across the metal. Parts of the fence had bent inward as though something far too strong had pushed through, leaving jagged gaps that looked more like teeth than broken bars. I stepped inside and instantly noticed the change. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of mold, rot, and damp earth. The silence was the worst. It wasn't quiet, it was the kind of silence that pressed into you, like the world itself was holding its breath. I shined my flashlight across cracked pavement and overgrown weeds. Old posters still clung to walls, faded and torn, but the faces on them stood out. Mickey, grinning wide, his gloved hands raised as if to wave. Minnie's bow tilted at a cheerful angle, but their eyes, even though they were just ink on paper, I felt their eyes follow me as I walked deeper into the ruins. Their smiles seemed wrong now, stretched too wide in the dim glow. The buildings were hollow shells of what they once were, paint peeled in long strips, hanging like dead skin. Doors hung off their hinges, swinging with the slightest breeze. I passed a concession stand, the glass cracked inside, littered with decayed paper cups and bags of popcorn long since turned to dust. My light caught something behind the counter and I almost screamed. It was a Mickey head, one of the old mascot masks, its mouth open in a frozen laugh. Only it wasn't on a costume. It was lying there on the counter like someone had ripped it off and left it behind. I told myself it was just abandoned props, nothing more, but my heart didn't listen. It beat so loud I thought whatever might be in the dark could hear it. My footsteps echoed strangely too, bouncing back at me like they didn't belong to me alone. I slowed, listening, and for a moment, I could have sworn there was another set of steps, just half a beat behind mine. That was when I heard it. Faint at first, almost too soft to notice. Music, a high tinny tune, warped like it was coming from an old music box underwater. The melody was broken, stopping and starting, but I knew what it was trying to play. The Mickey Mouse Club theme. My stomach turned. I forced myself to keep moving, telling myself it had to be some old speaker left running, maybe a generator that never died. But then I saw something that froze me in place. On the dusty ground in front of me was a footprint. Not human, not normal. It was huge, rounded at the front, with a flat sole, a shoe, a giant cartoon shoe. My breath hitched. The dust around it hadn't settled, like the print was new, as if something had just been here. I raised my flashlight and swept it across the hallway, and that's when I saw it. A shadow at the far end, moving just out of reach of the light. It twitched unnaturally, jerking like frames in a broken film reel. I raised the light higher, trying to focus, but the shape slipped out of sight, disappearing behind a corner. I wanted to run back, but my body betrayed me. I walked forward instead, drawn to the spot where it vanished. Each step felt heavier, as if the ground was pulling me in. When I turned the corner, my flashlight beam shook in my trembling hand. The walls were covered in something black and sticky, smeared across the cracked paint. Words, over and over, written in wide, uneven strokes. I squinted and realized what they said. Smile for Mickey. The letters dripped as if they had been freshly painted, and before I could even process it, I noticed something else. At the end of the hall, against the far wall, a figure stood for just a second. Round ears, a wide grin, then it was gone. The words on the wall burned into my mind, repeating over and over until they didn't look like words anymore, but like teeth grinning at me from the cracks. Smile for Mickey. I didn't want to stare, but it was impossible to look away. The dripping black substance smeared across the walls looked wet, like it had just been painted, and I couldn't bring myself to touch it to prove otherwise. My stomach nodded, and for a moment I thought I might be sick right there on the floor. The silence after the faint music faded was worse than the sound itself. It pressed into me, heavy and suffocating, making every breath feel like a mistake. The only thing breaking it was the echo of my footsteps, though I wasn't sure anymore if all of them were mine. I kept hearing something else softer, slower, dragging just a beat behind me, like I was being followed by something that didn't care if I knew it was there. I turned sharply with my flashlight, convinced I'd catch it in the beam, but the hallway was always empty. The shadows seemed to move when I wasn't looking at them, growing taller, bending at the corners of my vision. I moved faster, desperate to shake the feeling, until I stumbled into a wide courtyard. The center of it was dominated by a carousel. It was once bright and colorful, but now it stood frozen, its paint peeled away to reveal wood splintered and gray beneath. The horses were the worst. Their eyes had been hollowed out, leaving dark pits in their skull-like faces, and their mouths gaped wide in cracked, jagged grins. Some of them had no heads at all, their necks splintered, the broken stubs pointing toward the sky. My light danced across the platform, and I saw something that turned my blood cold. Lying on the carousel floor was a giant glove, white, cartoonish, with 3 black stripes stitched across the back, exactly like Mickey's hands. It was filthy, stained with something dark that I didn't want to identify. I wanted to back away, but the carousel began to move, slowly at first with a groan of metal grinding against rust, then faster, the horses jerking up and down as if they were alive again. And then came the music. The carousel's organs sputtered to life, playing a warped version of the Mickey Mouse March. The notes dragged, some of them cracked, bending into a distorted, haunting tune that made my chest tighten. I froze, my light shaking as I swept it across the spinning ride, and that was when I saw him. At first I thought it was just a shadow on the platform, but as the carousel turned, the figure came into view, tall, rounded ears, a massive head too big for its thin, spindly body. The grin was painted on, stretching across its face in an endless arc that showed no teeth, no lips, just black void where a mouth should be. It didn't move, it didn't need to. Its head turned with the carousel, and no matter where I stood, its face stayed locked on me. The ride slowed to a stop. My heart hammered so violently it hurt, and when the carousel came to a complete standstill, the figure was gone. Only the glove remained on the floor, limp and lifeless. I wanted to convince myself I imagined it, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I stumbled backward, turning to leave, when my foot caught on something soft. I looked down and instantly wished I hadn't, a costume or what looked like one. The fabric was shredded and caked with grime, and lying just inches from my boot was the oversized headpiece of Mickey Mouse. Its ears were torn, its painted smile cracked, and inside the hollow mask were teeth, not plastic, not fake. Human teeth, scattered in heaps along the bottom. Some yellowed, some broken, all real. My flashlight slipped in my sweaty hand, clattering against the ground, the beam swinging wildly across the courtyard. In that split second of darkness, I heard something close to me. A breath, slow and raspy like air moving through a throat that didn't work right anymore. I snatched the light, my hand trembling, and raised it toward the sound. Nothing was there, just empty rides and broken stalls. But then, as I strained to listen, I heard it again, clearer this time, right behind my ear. A single word, whispered in a voice that sounded more like a dying machine than a person. Smile. I ran without thinking, my legs carrying me through the dark pathways of the abandoned park, past crumbling buildings and broken lights. My lungs burned, and my breath tore out of me in ragged gasps, but I couldn't stop. I didn't dare stop. Every shadow felt alive, every corner hiding something waiting for me. The whisper still clung to my ear, echoing in my skull like it had been carved into me. I tried to convince myself it was only my imagination, but the pounding in my chest told me otherwise. I didn't know where I was going until I found myself in front of a building larger than the rest. Its sign was cracked, the letters faded, but I could just make out the word theater. The double doors were partly open, their paint blistered and curling. A pale, flickering light seeped from the gap, cutting through the suffocating dark. Against every instinct I stepped inside. The air hit me like a wall, damp, heavy, and thick with a sickening sweetness, like rotting fruit left too long in the sun. My flashlight barely pierced the darkness, but I didn't need it to see the rows of seats lined up before me, all facing a massive screen. Most of the seats were ripped open, their stuffing spilling out like entrails. The floor was sticky, every step clinging like it didn't want to let me go. Then the screen came alive. Static crackled across it before dissolving into an old, black and white cartoon. The sound was warped, a low hum tangled with a faint squeaking rhythm, like shoes on wet pavement. On the screen, Mickey walked down an endless road, head bowed, arms swinging loosely at his sides. There was no music, no joy, just the endless, repetitive plodding of his feet. At first it almost looked normal, just an unfinished animation stuck on loop. But then I noticed something else. Behind Mickey, shadows began to appear, faint and flickering. Each time the loop restarted, there were more of them. Long, twisted shapes that didn't move right. Some bent at impossible angles, others crawling on all fours. They followed him down the road, closer and closer each time. I leaned forward without realizing it, the glow of the screen holding me in place. My throat went dry as the shadows multiplied, their movements more erratic, their limbs stretching too far, their heads jerking violently. By the fifth loop, they weren't just following Mickey, they were reaching for him. Then the film froze. The frame lingered on Mickey as he turned to face the camera. His round eyes weren't cheerful anymore. They were empty, black voids, stretching wider, deeper, until it felt like they were pulling me in. The humming sound deepened into a distorted roar that made my ears ring. I staggered back, tearing my eyes from the screen, and that was when I saw it. In the reflection cast on the screen's glow, there was something sitting in the back row, a shape too large, with round ears and a massive head. Its posture was perfect, hands folded neatly in its lap, body stiff like a doll. The reflection showed it sitting motionless, staring straight at me. I whipped around, my flashlight beam cutting across the empty seats. Nothing, no one, just torn fabric and dust. I turned back toward the screen, heart hammering, but the reflection was gone too. I told myself I was losing my mind, that fear was playing tricks on me, but then I noticed the smell again, stronger this time, metallic and sour like blood. I followed it with shaking hands until my light landed on something in the back row, a glove, white and oversized, just like the one I'd seen at the carousel, but this one was different. It wasn't just dirty, it was soaked through, the fabric stiff with dried, dark stains. I wanted to drop the flashlight, to leave it there and run, but before I could move, I heard it again. A sound from somewhere in the theater, low and guttural, like breathing. Not calm, steady breaths, but wet, labored gasps, each one rattling with effort. It wasn't coming from the screen or the seats. It was coming from right beside me. I didn't want to look. Every muscle in my body screamed at me not to turn, not to raise the light. But my head moved on its own, slow and trembling, until the beam slid across the row to my left. The seat was empty, but something was resting on the armrest, a second glove. And this one was twitching, the fingers curling slowly, as though an unseen hand was pulling it into a fist. I bolted from the theater, nearly falling over as I pushed through the heavy doors. The night air outside didn't feel like relief. It was thicker than before, hotter, clinging to me like I had run straight into invisible hands. My chest heaved as I stumbled across broken pavement, the beam of my flashlight swinging wildly over rusted railings and cracked statues that leered with chipped smiles. I just wanted to get out, to find the gates and run until the park was nothing but a memory. But the more I moved, the less familiar everything looked. The paths twisted in ways I didn't remember. The signs that should have pointed toward the exit were all blank. Their lettering peeled away as though the paint itself had fled. I turned one corner, then another, but every road seemed to bend back into the same suffocating maze. The sound of my footsteps came back to me louder now, sharper, like someone else was deliberately following in time with me. Each time I stopped, the echo stopped too, as if mocking me. That was when I saw it. Rising in the distance, framed by the broken skyline of the park, was the castle, the centerpiece, the heart of everything. It should have been beautiful, glowing with lights, filled with laughter, but now it looked hollow, its towers blackened, its windows shattered like empty eyes. It pulled at me, like a weight dragging me forward. I didn't want to go, but my feet moved anyway, one step after another, as if my body had decided without me. The closer I got, the louder the sound became. At first it was faint, just under the surface of the night, but soon I realized what it was. Laughter. Children laughing. Not joyful, not real, but broken, looping, repeating the same notes again and again until it sounded more like screaming. The noise spilled from the castle gates, filling the air until it felt like it was vibrating in my bones. The gates themselves were half open, and beyond them the walls of the castle loomed, scarred and scorched. I pushed inside, and the laughter cut off like someone had thrown a switch. The silence hit harder than the sound, leaving only the rasp of my breathing and the squeak of my shoes against the filthy floor. My light swept across the walls, and my stomach twisted. Everywhere I looked were mascot heads, Mickey, Minnie, Donald, Goofy, all split down the middle, their empty shells piled in heaps. Some were slashed open, their stuffing hanging out like entrails. Others were filled with something darker, sticky stains that had dried into the fabric. The air was thick with rot, so heavy it burned the back of my throat. I moved forward, past murals painted along the hallway walls. They had once been bright, happy scenes of Mickey and his friends, but every face had been gouged out. Deep scratches tore through the plaster, leaving jagged wounds where the smiles should have been. I tried not to look, but every gouge seemed to line up perfectly with where eyes should be. The hallway ended at a heavy wooden door, slightly open. Light flickered from inside, weak and uneven, like a candle fighting against the dark. My hand shook as I pushed the door wider, and the sight inside made my heart stop. In the center of the room was a chair. Strapped to it was a figure, slumped forward, its chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. At first I thought it was just another costume, but as my light settled on the face, I realized it was worse. A Mickey mask covered its head, but it wasn't just worn, it was fused. The edges of the plastic had melted into the skin beneath, sealing it shut. The flesh blistered and raw where it had fused. I crept closer, unable to stop myself, drawn like prey, staring at its predator. My flashlight trembled in my hand as I leaned in, the glow spilling over the figure's chest. The straps holding it down were slick with something dark, and the smell coming off it made my eyes water. I wanted to back away, but my legs felt nailed to the floor. Then the figure moved, just barely. Its chest heaved, a wet rasp rattling out of it like air forced through broken lungs. Slowly, its head lifted, the fused mask creaking as it tilted up to face me. The giant round ears twitched in the flicker of the light, and the painted smile stretched toward me like a wound. For a moment, I prayed it wouldn't make a sound. that it would just slump forward again, lifeless, and let me leave. But then its voice broke the silence. A voice that was wrong, warped, too deep and too high at the same time, grinding out through the mask as if the plastic itself was speaking. Welcome home. I staggered backward, almost tripping over the bones scattered across the filthy floor. My light swung wildly, painting jagged shadows across the walls, and that was when I saw it. Every surface was carved with words, scratched deep into the plaster, written in uneven, desperate strokes, over and over. The same message repeated until the room seemed to breathe with it. Smile for Mickey. The grooves in the walls glistened as though they had been cut fresh, as though someone had been here moments ago, pressing each letter into the surface with blood instead of ink. The figure in the chair began to laugh. At first it was faint, weak, like air pushing through a cracked whistle, but then it grew louder, distorted, filling the entire room with a sound that didn't belong in any human throat. The mask shook with each broken laugh. The painted grin stretched into something monstrous in the flickering light. My ears rang from the noise, and my chest tightened as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. I turned to flee, but when I spun around, my breath caught in my throat. The hallway I had come from wasn't there anymore. Instead, the doorway was filled with shapes. Figures stood shoulder to shoulder, their silhouettes tall and warped, blocking out any escape. My flashlight beam trembled as I raised it toward them, and the light revealed the nightmare I had tried to convince myself wasn't real. They were mascots. Dozens of them, Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, Donald, all with round heads and cartoonish bodies. But their faces were wrong. The smiles weren't painted anymore. They were carved, split too wide, exposing jagged rows of teeth that glistened in the light. Their eyes were empty, black voids that seemed to stretch endlessly into the dark. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like puppets being yanked forward by invisible strings. They stepped closer, all at once, their shoes squeaking against the floor in perfect rhythm. The sound echoed inside my skull, drilling into me until I thought I would lose my mind. My flashlight flickered as I stumbled back toward the chair, but the figure strapped to it only laughed harder, shaking against the restraints, its body jerking like it was trying to tear itself free. The mascots circled me, their heads tilting in unison, watching me with their hollow eyes. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My throat locked tight, strangled by fear, as one of them stepped forward. Its oversized glove reached out, dragging across the wall, leaving behind a trail of black stains that oozed and dripped like tar. In its other hand it held something, a mask. Not just any mask, not just any mask. A Mickey mask, identical to the one fused to the figure in the chair. Its glossy surface reflected my own terrified face, distorted by the curve of the plastic. The mascot raised it higher, tilting its head as if to admire me. My knees shook so violently I thought they'd give out, but I couldn't move. Every muscle was locked, frozen under the weight of their eyes. The laughter in the room reached a deafening pitch. It wasn't just the figure in the chair anymore. The mascots were laughing too, their mouths opening wider than any costume should have allowed. Their voices a chorus of warped, broken sounds that scraped against my ears. The words mixed into the noise, chanted over and over in voices too distorted to be human. Smile for Mickey. Smile for Mickey. Smile for Mickey. The one holding the mask stepped closer. I pressed myself against the wall, shaking my head, trying to force out a scream, but the sound was swallowed by the laughter. The mask hovered in front of my face now, close enough that I could see every detail. The inside was smeared with something dark, the edges jagged, not smooth like plastic should be. I realized with horror that it wasn't a costume at all, it was skin. The moment the thought hit me, the lights in the castle exploded into brightness. The entire room was bathed in blinding white, and when my eyes adjusted, the walls weren't covered in words anymore. They were mirrors, dozens of them, stretching in every direction, reflecting me over and over. But in every reflection, I wasn't myself. I was wearing the mask. I clawed at my face, desperate to tear it away, but my fingers met smooth, cold plastic where my skin should have been. The laughter thundered inside my skull, drowning out everything else, and in the glass I watched my own reflection tilt its head, its painted grin splitting wider, wider, until it nearly cracked in half. The mascots stepped closer, their voices blending into one final chant that rattled through the mirrored walls. Welcome home. The light snapped off, the room was gone, and all that remained was the echo of laughter, faint and endless, carrying through the park long after I should have been able to hear it.